Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar session, Customizing CK-12 FlexBooks and Adaptive Practice. I'm Lindsay, one of the CK-12 team members, and my colleague Katie and I will be running today's webinar. Many of you joining us today are participating in the CK-12 Certified Educator Program, so welcome back to all of you. If you are brand new to the Certified Educator Program and would like to learn more and officially register with us, you can visit ck12.org/certified and press register to get started. Our recently revamped program includes 4 components. It includes 2 on-demand sessions, 3 core live webinars, matching assignments for all sessions, and a final form requesting your certificate. Since this session counts as one of those core live sessions, you'll already be a third of the way through that requirement at the end of this hour. So at the end of today's webinar, we can definitely discuss more about the Certified Educator Program for anyone with questions, or you can type any questions in the Q&A window for our team to answer privately. Speaking of the Q&A window, I want to make sure that you all are comfortable with the 2 windows that we'll be using in today's webinar. There's one window that says Q&A, and that is where we would like you to type any questions that you have for CK-12. Our team will answer some of them via text, and then Katie will also be pausing occasionally to do some live demos. So the chat window is a place for community conversation. You guys are already doing a really awesome job with this. We would love for you to introduce yourselves. Tell us where you're from, what subject do you teach, how things are going in your part of the world. Just make sure in that chat window that you're sending any general posts to all panelists and attendees, and not just to CK-12 or the panelists. So it has to say all panelists and attendees in order for everyone to see that. Also, we are recording this webinar and it will be posted to our webinar's website within 24 hours.
Thanks, Lindsay, and thanks to everyone who joined us today. We're going to cover the following topics. The first is FlexBook editing. So we'll talk about customizing, combining, rearranging, editing, and even creating FlexBooks 2.0 and lessons, and then curating related content that goes with that. After that, we'll talk about customizing practice, from creating quizzes, using quizzes, whether independently or within a FlexBook, as practice or inline questions, and then the reports that you would get based on how you use those quizzes. And we'll wrap up with after customization, so assigning, sharing, publishing, and how to get all that on a school page.
Awesome. I do want to mention that we have 2 resource pages you might find handy for this session. The first will help you with customizing FlexBooks, and it's available at this tiny URL that we're putting in the chat window here in just a moment for you, but tinyurl.com/CK12ADVFB2019. The second resource page that we have for you is on customizing CK-12 adaptive practice and assignments. And this one is available at the tiny URL CK-12 Custom AP 2019. Now, these are just a double-sided resource page that's going to cover a lot of what Katie talks about in today's webinar. So you're welcome to download those and save them for future reference, print them off, whatever you need to do. But there's no immediate action item here for now. You can just sit back and enjoy learning on this webinar. As we go through this session, we'll be covering the big ideas behind customization of FlexBooks and practice. At the same time, you may find that you want more information on certain pieces, whether now or down the road when you do more customization. Well, we're happy to stay on afterward and answer any questions. You can find more information and step-by-step directions about the following topics in our quick overview section of our CEP FlexBook. That includes finding, uploading, formatting, and attributions, finding and using embedded codes for videos, interactives, and Google slide presentations, creating and curating modalities on CK-12 to add as related content, lesson plans and videos, etc. Using CK-12's math editor, creating your own questions for quizzes, and then multi-concept assignments for those using CK-12 classes, plus more resources related to CK-12 classes. So again, if you're wanting to do a deep dive into any of these types of subjects, we do have some overview videos available for you. But I think we're going to go ahead and get going today on the topic of editing a FlexBook. So I'm going to hand it off to Katie.
Thanks. So the first thing I want to talk about is customizing and combining FlexBooks. So if you start with a CK-12 FlexBook or one that another user has made and published on our site, all you need to do is simply click that Customize button to make a copy that you can begin editing. Now, if you want to pull from multiple existing books, you can use the Add to FlexBook option that you'll see, and that will add individual lessons, chapters from our legacy content, or an existing or brand new FlexBook. You can also go to your library to start a FlexBook or FlexBook 2.0 from scratch, and that's where you'll find any work that you have customized or created. Now, when you want to customize a FlexBook, you can use the options on the table of contents level, and this will allow you to delete sections or even whole chapters that you don't plan on using. You can also use the drag arrow option to reorder lessons, which is especially helpful if you're adding a new content. Any new content that you add shows up at the bottom of the TOC or the table of contents, and then you can adjust accordingly. Now, from within the FlexBook editor, you can also add new chapters and even new sections, whether you use them as a traditional text lesson, or you could use those as a bucket to embed media or some combination of the two. Now, one note, just best practice is to always stick with a single tab that you work sequentially so that every save you do is saved in order. And that way all of the work when you're in edit is saved, and then you can go elsewhere and add from there. Now, if you want to edit an actual lesson, all you need to do is click on the pencil edit icon next to any section of a FlexBook, or create a brand new lesson, what we call a read, that you'll have access to in the editor. There you can directly adjust or write any text, as you can see here, and you can use our toolbar for special formatting and media. 3 icons I do want to be sure to point out are our math editor, so that little X with the curly braces, which allows you to create formatted math text, our image upload option, which includes an option to upload a file and the needed attributions and licensing notes, and our media option, which allows you to embed interactive videos and more using a standard embed code. When editing any section of a FlexBook, or even the whole FlexBook, you'll see some other tab options available. The first one after edit is resources. Here you can upload answer keys, labs, anything like that, kind of a PDF that you want to share. Just make sure that anything you add and share also fits under our license. These will then show up under resources in the toolbar for that particular section or lesson. After the resources is the details tab. Here you can add in or adjust lesson objectives, vocabulary, and most importantly, as you go down, any new source or other credit attributions. Once saved, these show up on the same toolbar, but down at the bottom under concept details. Now, any lesson included in a FlexBook 2.0, so this is one of the distinguishing features between our older platform and our newer platform, is the 2.0 version has this extra tab called Related. And here you can see the matching curated modalities, so other ways to learn, and you have the option to remove any that you don't want by using that little X, or add in additional ones that you do. You can also use this tab to swap out the matching practice for a quiz, but I am going to talk about that later on in this session. Now, these curated modalities or curated ways to learn show up under Other Ways to Learn when you first open a section from the table of contents. And once you're in a lesson by clicking Start, you can find them in the toolbar under Related Content. So with that, I think we're going to swap over, and I am going to share my screen, and we're going to walk you through how to get started and customize. So let's say you're teaching an integrated science class. And if you look at our subjects up here or scroll down and look at our science options here. So right now I'm looking at the student version, which gives you kind of a quick overview. If I jump back to the teacher homepage, you have the same options, but they're just listed. So here you can see kind of different resources to work with. But let's say I want a combination of physical and earth science here. So I can pick either book to start with. Let's say earth science. And from here, if I want to use this as the basis for what I'm working with, under choose, I'm going to click the customize button. And what this does is it creates a shell of another book with pointers towards all of the content CK-12 already has in here. Now, we usually recommend that you change the title to, let's say, My Middle School, so that you know that this is a book that's yours and it's easy to distinguish if you happen to have already added the CK-12 book to your library or something like that. So definitely go ahead and adjust the title so that you're aware that this is the one that you're working off of. Now from here you can see, okay, let's say I'm not going to teach the solar system this year. So I could go ahead and I could remove that chapter. I could do the same thing for the Beyond the Solar System chapter, or I could pick and choose individual lessons in there to delete by just expanding the table of contents for that chapter using this little toggle option. And I could remove individual lessons. But if you're going to do a whole chapter, it's much faster to just do the chapter as a whole. Go ahead and remove that. Now next year, if I decided I did want to teach the solar system, I could always go find the CK-12 FlexBook and add in those sections again. So no worries, it's not like you lost it, you just removed the pointer to that content. From here, let's say I wanted to talk about an introduction to earth science before the nature of science. I could use this drag arrow option to swap that, and it would move that entire chapter and all the lessons inside it that you can see here to the beginning. Or I could go ahead and swap that back. So that's kind of your basic deleting and reordering. If I wanted to add new chapters, I'd use this add content option. And I can put a new chapter in here. So new demo chapter. And if you remember, I said all new things I add to a FlexBook show up at the bottom. So down here, you can see this new demo chapter, and there's nothing in that yet. If I wanted to add a new lesson, I would go ahead and add a new read, and it would open up that particular option. Now, you can also see kind of within any particular section, I could go ahead and I could edit a lesson going from here. But even before I do that, if you remember, I said, let's try to create a combined book. So I'm going to go ahead and say Earth and Physical Science. I'm going to save this as my middle school Earth and Physical Science book. I don't need to duplicate middle school. And I'm going to go ahead and save this book. Because if you remember, we're going to work with a single tab and not be all over the place. So this has the 21 sections in it plus the demo chapter that I have left in there. And now I want to go ahead and add in the physical science pieces. So let's go ahead and open up physical science. And instead of starting this customized process all over again, I want to add this content to the lesson, to the existing book. So instead of choosing customize, I'm going to choose add to FlexBook 2.0. And in here, you can see the new My Middle School Earth and Physical Science book I made today. I'm going to select that option. Or I could create a new one, which is especially helpful if you're converting from our older platform to a newer platform. That add to option allows you to convert it and create a new 2.0 lesson. I can go ahead and click OK. And now we said all of our content that I'm customizing and working with is available in my library. So in the 2.0 platform, you can see your library right here. So I'm going to click on my name, click on my library. And we will see right at the top this FlexBook that I'm editing right here. So if I open this up, instead of having those 22 sections or 21 sections that we had, it now has plenty more because I've added in the entire physical science book. And this is where you're going to definitely want to cut this down because you're probably not going to use all of these pieces at the same time. So I can go ahead back. I can click edit one more time. And you'll see here, once again, the sections for earth science, my break little new demo chapter, and then my introduction to physical science. So this allows me to see the whole section. I can delete, I can reorder, I can work my way through however you want that to be. Now, let's go ahead and edit a lesson. And this would be the same thing if I expanded a chapter and clicked on the pencil edit icon here. So let's pick one on scientific notation. Or I could do this by creating a new read under that add option, and it will bump me into the editor. Now, a brand new one would be empty. This one I think is helpful to see what it looks like because it actually has content already in there, and we can work with that. Now, I don't need to change the title. I like the title scientific notation, so I'm just going to click save. It's going to create a copy of this that I can now edit. So everything else in my book is still pointing to the CK-12 content. This particular one, I've now created a separate copy that I can edit and I can make my own. From within here, I can edit the text. I can add text color, highlighting color. That's one way to get those pieces showing up for your students. You'd actually have to edit the content. I can insert a math editor thing, just like this A times 10 to the B. That's in our math editor. And that would allow me to see kind of what that looks like. The new version, if I put in a new one, even has a drop-down option for teachers if I want to put in a brand new one. You know nothing about coding, it's available there. And you can kind of drop down and use different pieces to create an equation. We also have the option to embed media. So let's click on this embedded media option and preview it so I can see what it is. It looks like it is a video about converting between standard and scientific notation. So that's useful. Let's leave that in there. And then it looks like we have an image here. And if we click on this image option here, you'll see it has copyright information included. You'd want to make sure that's true for anything you upload. And you can work your way through those pieces. So that's kind of the core lesson part that you can update. And this is just a quick start so you get a sense of what your options are. We talked about the resources tab. So right here, there's no files uploaded for this particular lesson, but if I created a worksheet for my students or a lab that fit under our license and I was willing to share, more than welcome to add it there. Under details, you can see here the description, learning objectives, and then that this lesson was written by Jean Brainerd, PhD. So if I added content that needed an additional source, I'd go ahead and I'd add in other pieces there as well. The last one, as we said, because this is part of our newer environment, has some related content. This little icon is our Plex icon. It's our play, learn, interact, and explore scenario. So those are available. They relate to the scientific notation. The little world is a real world application. So I taught high school math and I always got the question, how is this used? Why would I ever use this? We're hoping to kind of answer that question in there. And then some videos that might be useful for a student. These aren't embedded in the content. They're available under the toolbar as related additional pieces. Now, if I didn't want one of these, I could simply remove it. And if I did want more, I could click the add a modality option. And I could actually say, let's put that Plex back in there. And these videos are already chosen. Maybe I want this additional video added as well. So I'm going to add that selected piece. I could also, if I wanted to, right here for my quizzes, pull a quiz and swap out the matching practice. But as I said, we're going to talk about that kind of from the front end later on in today's session. So this is all my related stuff. I'm going to finalize this because when I finalize, then anyone who's accessing this can see my updates. Nothing is really final on CK-12. I can go ahead and back and edit that afterwards. All of your lessons, when you click finalize, the draft is just, I'm partway through. I don't even want my kids to see updates. I'm going to hold it in draft mode a little longer. But here in this lesson, I can find under that related content, under that toolbar, that this Plex that I added back in and the additional video are now available as part of this particular lesson. So that gives you an idea of kind of the ways that you can edit and adjust both the content, whether that's rearranging content, removing content, or going in and editing content or creating new content. So maybe this is a good time to stop and see if we have some questions coming in. It looks like we've been getting some.
We have, Katie. We've had a lot of questions and our team is busy answering them. one thing that came in that I just want to make sure that I address is that, yes, absolutely everything you see on CK-12 is free. If we failed to mention that at the beginning, that's an important thing to note. You're not going to hit a paywall. You're never going to have to pay for anything. This is all free. So that's one thing. Katie, several people were asking about, are they able to use our platform to create their own books? And are there any limitations to what they can add to those books?
Sure. So we can create our own book if I go ahead to my library. And instead of using that customize option or that add to FlexBook option, I can choose in the library level, create new. And I'm going to stick with 2.0 because that gives me the newer version, the newer piece. And if I click on this part here, I can then put my demo FlexBook for April 21st. And from that point forward, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to add a new chapter in like we did before. And then I can create a new lesson or a new read from here. Or I could explore across CK-12 and add from there. But this allows me to do this from scratch. So if I click that new read option here, it's going to bump me into that editor. I'm going to put my new read for April 21st. I highly recommend you pick the subject that you're going to work off of when you do this to make it easy to find. And then I can put test example in here. From here, I have all of the same choices. And I just gave you a taste of what you can play with in terms of adding and editing pieces in this lesson, but that gives you a chance to see how this works. And then if I keep this as a draft for right now, let's say it'll kick me back into the editor, and you'll see that it shows up at the bottom of where I was working. And I can go ahead and move that into the chapter that I built. So I built a chapter, I have this new lesson, I'm gonna expand this chapter open, meaning that now I have the ability to pull stuff into it, and I can just drag that right in there, and now I have that lesson. So you can go ahead and build out all new content and add in embedded interactives, anything that fits under our license.
Great. Several people asked about converting a 1.0 FlexBook to a 2.0 FlexBook and why they might want to do that.
Sure. So our 2.0 FlexBooks, if we look at our subjects for a second, all of these science books, the earth science, life science, physical, biochem, and all of the math by level from 6th grade up to pre-calculus, we have already taken the time to curate those related modalities, those clicks or interactives or other pieces. However, we haven't done that for all of our books yet. We're working our way through. So let's say you were working with calculus, for example, and you wanted to use our FlexBook for calculus, and we have yet to convert that and add those pieces in. You could click on your books for calculus. I could say I want my calc concept book. And if I pull it into 2.0, then I have the ability to add that related content piece on my own, even though we haven't done that for you quite yet. It also allows you to see insights and kind of work in that newer, smoother, cleaner platform. So from here, what I would do is I would choose the add to FlexBook textbook option. I would create a new FlexBook. And from here, I get to pick the type. And if I want to convert it, I want to make sure my new one is that 2.0 version. And then I'm going to say my 2.0 calc book. And it says it's been added to this book. So if I go to my library from here, I can see this new 2.0 calc book. Now, because I picked a concept book that started, it was already broken down. It had matching practice attached to it. And so if I open up any of these lessons now, that related content, even though the related pieces aren't available yet, the practice is right here available with this lesson. And so I can now assign this as one unit. So that would be another good reason for converting to 2.0.
Okay, Katie, we've still got a lot of questions in the Q&A, but I think some of them are relating to our next topic of practice versus quizzes. So I think I'm going to go ahead and take the screen back from you and thank you to everybody to continue to populate that Q&A window, but why don't we get going with the difference between practice and quizzes. So in our FlexBook 2.0 platform webinar, in that webinar, we discussed CK-12 adaptive practice and told you how it adjusts to students' skill level and even offers recommendations for further learning. You are always more than welcome to use that tool, but if you want to tailor student practice, you can create what we call a quiz on CK-12. Before Katie goes into how to create a quiz, I want to make sure that you understand the difference between quizzes and adaptive practice. So they both can pull from our database of over 150,000 math, science, and spelling questions. However, quizzes also give you the option to create your own questions and use them. You can assign quizzes like practice, but student reports are based on the percentage of questions they got right, unlike our practice, which aims for a goal of 10 correct, regardless of how many questions are completed. You also have various options for quizzes, from picking the order of questions to setting time limits. Remember that CK-12 won't override any of these choices by adapting to student performance or stopping them to provide recommendations. If you want those features, you'll need to use CK-12 adaptive practice as is. All right, let me pass it over to Katie to give you some more detail.
So the first thing you might want to do is create a new quiz. Let's say you want to build one of your own. You can do that from scratch by going to your library, and just where I showed you how to create a new FlexBook 2.0, right under that is the option to create a new quiz. From there, you'd pull existing questions from our database or write your own if you'd rather do that. Now, if you want to instead start with something that we already have in our system, let's say it's for math or science or even spelling questions, you can click on any customized option you see, whether that's in the practice frame, within a 2.0 lesson, or our older lessons. All of those customized options are available to customize the practice. And this will start that quiz for you, but will include a subset of the practice for that particular concept as you start. Now, once you get bumped into the quiz editor, the first thing you're going to want to do is pick a title for your quiz. Now, just like I said, April 21st is not super helpful along the way. I highly recommend that you include the purpose or the topic of the quiz here. This will be useful both just for tracking reasons and if you want to add it to a 2.0 lesson. You can also add a description of the quiz if you want, which will help you when you're editing it to remember why you created it or what it includes. Now, once you have at least a title, you can choose your setting options. This includes limiting the number of tries a student gets to complete a quiz and setting the time limit for the whole quiz. In general, you want to stick with the English as the language option, as that has the majority of our questions. If you do want to write your own questions in another language, currently the options are Spanish or Portuguese, or pull from any questions that might be available in those languages. Based on work that we have done with certain partners, you're welcome to try out that option. But know it's a newer feature and there are only limited questions currently available for other languages. Below that are the options to allow students to see hints, see solutions for questions after they answer them, and to auto shuffle the questions for each student. This would kind of allow them to answer all the same questions, but at a different time, so they're not doing the same exact question at the same time. Note that if you pick this option to shuffle, you'll lose the ability to choose the order of your questions within the editor. So just make sure if you want to specifically order them, that shuffle questions is not selected. Now, we've also added the ability for students to pause their quiz and resume it later. This is especially helpful if you're really treating this like a homework or a custom practice and not a timed assessment. So they now have the ability, if you select that, to pause their work and come back and resume it down the road. Once you've picked your general settings, it's time to pick your concepts and questions. If you started by customizing practice, you'll see that first concept already included, and it's usually defaulted to a randomly selected 20 questions from a variety of easy, medium, and hard and question types that are available in our system. Now, if you started from scratch or you want to add another concept, you'll want to click on the Add Question Set option. Then search to find a CK-12 concept to pull in your own quiz, or choose Create New Questions if you want to create brand new ones tied to a lesson that you have already worked on. If you include multiple concepts, just drag based on the order and you can reorder which ones come first within your lesson. Now, once any concept is included, you can adjust the number of questions, at which point the system will randomly pick a new variety of easy, medium, and hard questions from those various types. So this is a super easy way to adjust the number of questions that you want within your quiz, but remember it pulls a new set each time. So if you've already handpicked the questions you want, don't reset the number from this level. And we will warn you about that before we let you actually select that. If, as I said, you wanted to actually handpick those questions, click on the pencil edit icon, which if you hover over the concept box, you'll see it. And this will open up the randomly selected questions and any other questions that are available for that concept. You can then preview any, reorder them, and select or deselect questions based on whichever ones you want to include. If you want to create your own questions, you can do so using the Create New Questions or the Add Questions options from within any of the quiz editor pieces. The first allows you to create questions related to a particular concept, or even tag them to a lesson you have created. The second option, that Add Questions, if you're already within a concept, allows you to add questions to that specific existing concept you're in. Once in the question editor, first pick the type of question first. Now I said basically everything is changeable after the fact. This is the one thing. Once you create a question and you save it the first time, that type is fixed. So go ahead and figure out what type of question you want, and that will give you all the fields you need to fill in. You can pick from multiple choice, select all that apply, true, false, fill in the blank, short answer. Our drag and drop option there is a categorizing option. So let's say you're putting in even numbers and odd numbers. So those would be your categories you drag and drop into. Our highlighting option is like circling the correct answer. So you kind of click on a word or phrase and it highlights that whole section. And our final discussion option has no right or wrong answers. So that's great as just a general prompt at the end of a lesson or for one of our Plix interactives or something like that. Now, after you pick your question type, fill in the pieces. This includes the question, any answer or distractors, hints if you want to add in hints, the level of difficulty, and any details there. If you're creating a question that's not already tagged to a particular concept, then you will need to make sure to choose the CK-12 concept you want to associate it with. And that's either a CK-12 existing math, science, or spelling concept, or you can search within your library and tag it to a lesson or read you've created. Now, just like when adding new sections to a FlexBook, your new questions will show up at the bottom of the questions that have already been chosen for that concept, and you can drag and reorder them at that point. Once you've made a quiz, there are 3 options you have for using that quiz. You could swap out the practice included in a 2.0 FlexBook, or simply add a quiz if no practice already exists for one that you've made. At that point, if you assign the 2.0 lesson to your class, they would be doing that matching quiz, and you'd get a report on that lesson with the quiz included. If you wanted a report for student work on that quiz, but you didn't want to replace the practice, let's say you already assigned the lesson with the practice in it, you can assign that quiz separately using that Assign to Class orange option on the actual quiz page in your library. The final way to use a custom questions is by embedding them into a lesson. We call these inline questions. They can be great to help students learn as they work their way through a lesson, but you will not get a report for questions that are embedded as inline questions, since they're geared towards learning versus assessment. Students will need to successfully complete each question before moving on to the next one, and we recommend you include feedback to help them work through their way through this process if you intend to use your quiz as inline questions for a lesson. Now, those first 2 options, the assigning a lesson that includes it swapped out for that practice or assigning a quiz directly, we'll generate a report for that quiz. The report score is based on the % of questions that were correct out of the total number of questions, which is different from our adaptive practice. Adaptive practice has a goal of 10 correct, regardless of the number of questions a student completes. Now, just like in practice, if you click on any specific score, it will pop up the details for all attempts for that particular quiz or all of the matching practice information. And for quizzes attached to 2.0 lessons, you can also see information under the lesson insights. In practice, when you click on insights in a 2.0 lesson, gives you the time spent and the skill level. Quizzes will give you the time on the lesson and the % score for that quiz. So I'm going to go ahead and swap back over to CK-12. And we are going to go back to our homepage using our nice little icon and start this new process over again. So the first thing that I want to just remind you is if you go to your library, you could create a brand new quiz by choosing Create New Quiz here. Now, alternatively, you may find it easier to work off of existing stuff. So let's go ahead back to my demo book that we were working on. Actually, that's a new one. So let's say our scientific notation read, which is in Earth and Physical Science. If I'm working within this particular lesson, let's stick with that nice little, where were we working off of? Scientific notation here. So if I go ahead into scientific notation, and I go into that lesson, remember that these are the related content pieces I added in there. And I already own a copy of this lesson because I customized it already. It has matching practice here, but if I wanted to create a quiz, I could choose this little arrow down and customize this practice, and that will bump me into the quiz option. So just like Create New Quiz, it's all here except it preloaded the content for scientific notation that I was working off of. So that can be useful. So I'm going to call this my scientific notation quiz or SciNotation quiz for April. I can set the number of attempts here. So if I was actually using this as a quiz and not practice, I might want to pick the number of attempts where students only have one shot at it or a couple shots as they go through. And choose the time limit as well. Because I'm using this for homework really, not really a quiz, I'm going to allow students to start it, pause their work, go have dinner with their family, come back and continue working their way through. From here, I can say I don't really need all 20 of these questions. So I'm going to go ahead and let's say reset this to 10 questions. And when I click outside this to have it save, it warns me that it's pulling a new batch of 10 questions. Not a problem. I haven't re-chosen already kind of any of the questions, so I'm going to let it pull a brand new set, and that's good to go. Now, I pulled some scientific notation pieces, but let's say I want to add some from maybe a math class as well. So I could go ahead and I could put in scientific notation, and let's see what we get. We get some from chemistry, some from physical science, and we have some from arithmetic that let's say I also want to pull from. So if I do that, I'm going to select that option, and it's going to now add additional resources into this quiz from, it looks like the 400 arithmetic scientific notation questions we have in our system. And I could do the same thing here. I could adjust the number, I could go through, and I can even reorder these two pieces if I wanted these ones to come out first. Now let's actually go in and show you how to edit the question pieces here. So if I click on the pencil edit icon, it allows me to edit those parts. And here you can see that we picked some true false and multiple choice questions. I can even use my toggle option to expand and see what this looks like. Avogadro's number may be expressed as this. I can get some hints. So you can see everything a student would see when they were actually answering this particular question. And I can reorder these because I didn't choose shuffle. All of those are options. I can even pick different questions that I wanted by selecting new ones or deselecting ones I don't want. Pretty straightforward there. And then the last option is I can add my own questions. Now, when I choose add question option here, I am tagging it to the scientific notation concept. So I would want to make sure my questions match that particular concept. So here we have our multiple choice option. It's pre-filling with your question. You need at least 3 options for multiple choice as you're working your way through, but I can remove this 4th option, not a problem. I could pick select all that apply, where I could choose more than one answer. True, false would be your other binary, kind of like a multiple choice option here. I could change this true to say, let's say even or odd. And notice that each time I pick a different type, it resets the answer formatting. So you do want to make sure that you pick the type that you're working off of first. So let me pick a particular thing. Let's do fill in the blank. I'm going to change my question type. And we're going to say rewrite 1,386 in scientific notation. And students only have a keyboard to work off of. So if I want to help them out, I could write this answer as 1.386 times 10 to the 2nd. And let's say 3rd. Here, and I can make this a little superscript. And then I am going to highlight anything I want an answer to be. So here's one of the answer choices I want to work off of. If I wanted this superscript, I could even add another answer choice there. And these are the parts that my student would be filling in. Now it's already tagged to scientific notation, so that's not a problem. I could add any hints I wanted here just by typing in hint number 1, whatever that looks like. And I'm going to submit this question. Now, as soon as I hit submit, the question type is fixed. And let's go ahead and preview that question and see what it looks like. You can see we have 10 to the something, so 1.386. And if I did 10 to the 2nd, it would show me that I got part of it correct, but part of it incorrect as I go from there. And I could even see the hint that I put there. Now, once I've previewed that, I'm all set. I like my question. I can just click update, and now I'm done. I don't need to re-preview it. And just like that new lesson or new chapter or anything I add to a FlexBook, this is going to show up at the bottom of all the ones I picked. So you can see right here, the example question that I just created. So that gives you kind of a sense on how to start creating questions. Each type of question is a little bit different, but go ahead and play with our editor to see what types of questions you might want to create and how that plays out. Now, I'm going to go ahead and save this. If I wanted to create a brand new question set that wasn't tied to scientific notation, or if I was starting from scratch and needed one, I could go ahead and click this create new questions, or I could browse for a concept like I did before. And in the create new questions, from here, I would want to add a concept that is related to something in my library. So if it's either, I could search across CK-12 for scientific notation, if I wanted to continue that, hopefully spelling it correctly so our thing would work, and I could pull from there. Or I could search in my library, and it looks like I have a lesson on writing numbers in scientific notation. So that would be how you would go about creating something that's tagged to a lesson that you wrote. Let's say it's for history or English or something else beyond that. You would just pick a different concept, and then everything else would work the same way. Now for simplicity, I'm going to go ahead and go back. Don't actually need to create this new lesson or new piece, so we're not going to worry about that part. And I'm going to update and save this quiz as is. And we can go back to my quizzes. And you'll see in your library, or my library, this new scientific notation April quiz that I created. As I said, there's a couple of different ways that I could use this. I could go ahead and I could open this quiz and just assign it directly to my students using the assign to class option right here. And that would assign to any CK-12 class or any Google class directly from the platform. And if you were using Canvas or Schoology, you'd be able to find the same quiz in your library in that platform and then assign it from there. I could pull under this little 3 ellipse dot option and embed as inline questions. So if I just wanted this to be an embed option, I would then pull the embed code from here, and I could use this just like you saw that video embedded in a lesson. And for simplicity, I'm going to go ahead and show you what that looks like in one of our math books. So let's go ahead and pick subjects for a second. And I'm going to pick a grade 7 lesson. And in our new middle school math book, we've actually used a lot of inline questions. So if I go ahead and pull this up, you'll see other ways to learn as you're going through there. And you'll see, here's an example of inline questions. So this was created as a quiz, and then students can go ahead and check this out. And because this was designed specifically for this, we made sure to add in that feedback for each incorrect answer. So just remember, as you're writing questions, if you use them here, to add in that feedback. So let's see, I'm not even reading this, which is not super helpful. I would start at 4 and move 7 units to the left. There we go. And now I can continue on. So that's an example of using inline questions within a particular piece. If I go back to my library, I can go ahead and I can open the book that I was working off of. So my middle school earth and physical science book. And in a particular lesson, I can choose to swap out the matching practice. So if I go ahead down to scientific notation, and I go into that lesson, right now it has practice attached. If I assigned this, I would be assigning the lesson itself and the matching practice, which is going to adapt. From there, I can also assign the quiz. But if I didn't want to use this practice and I wanted to use my custom practice as their homework, I can choose a different practice for a new topic, or the switch to quiz option. And I'm going to choose to swap this out to a quiz. Now, this is why demos like March 26 quiz are not super helpful, because I don't know what that means. But one that is labeled scientific notation, I know that's the lesson that I want to go from there. I can scroll down and click add. And this has now changed this from having that adaptive practice to having that matched quiz that I put in there. If instead I wanted to go ahead and embed it in here, then that's where I'd be using the embed code, just like I showed you how to do it for videos beforehand. So let's show you what this looks like just in a class to give you a sense of how things show up based on what I scored. So I'm going to go ahead and choose my classes for a second. And we're going to pick a demo class. And in here under reports, anywhere that you see quiz, so here's a quiz option, I could have assigned that quiz individually, and that would give me the score percent, any number of attempts the student did, their actual answers, and how they worked their way through. So I get that regardless of whether or not it was attached within a 2.0 lesson or I assigned it separately. Now, if I did assign it within 2.0 lesson, which is actually how this worked out, and I go back to my class for a second and click on the assignment link, and this is available across platforms. So the insights that I'm about to show you are available regardless of whether you're in Canvas, Schoology, Google Classroom, or CK-12. You just want to open the assignment just like a student would. They'd click on the link. And when you open that from within that class page, you can then see the matching insights. So for here, I'm going to go to my toolbar. And because I swapped, you can see here it says view quiz instead of practice. I swapped out that practice for a quiz in the past. I had some students do some work on it. And in CK-12, I'm going to just pick the class that it works with. If you're coming from a learning management system, it will auto preset that class to match the one from there. And I can go ahead and explore and see the time students spent on the lesson, their quiz score that they worked their way through, anytime they actually did anything. And you can see kind of as it adjusts and goes through from here. So you get both the reports and the insights if you swapped out that practice for a quiz. So let's go ahead and stop there and see what we have for questions.
We have quite a few questions that our team has flagged. Maybe we'll just take one now before we go into our final section of the webinar, and then tackle some more later. But one of the questions was about embedding, Katie, of what kinds of things can be embedded in addition to the inline questions. And then somebody was asking to see a Plex embedded in a lesson. How do you have that process of how to do that?
Okay. Well, let's go ahead, and the first thing I might want to do is pull up a Plex. So let's explore. Our Explore menu is fantastic. So let's pull up a Plex. And here I want to search for, if we're going to stick with the same thing, scientific notation. I can pull any of these up. And from within a Plex or in one of our simulations, you're going to pull the embed code from this little ellipses at the top. And I think it's vertical in a sim versus a Plex. Now, for a Plex, you have two options. You have the basic Plex option and the complete Plex option. So the basic Plex, I'm going to close this for a second, just embeds this interactive piece, but not all the challenge me questions. Whereas the full Plex, if I go back to here, would embed everything and it would launch the entire Plex. So let's go ahead and copy this part right here. And then I am going to go back, close this out, close this out. And then we're going to go to my library and open that same scientific notation read. And best practice is to do it from within the FlexBook so that it's updated appropriately. And I'm going to edit this. And we're going to go down and we're going to embed it. Now, while this is loading for a second, we can talk about what that looks like. So I can embed a Plex, I can embed an interactive, I can embed our practice questions, but those are already in 2.0, so I would generally leave those as attached components. Inline questions, and we've even had teachers embed presentations, whether that's a Google Slides presentation or something like that. But just make sure that anything you're sharing that way is allowed to be shared external to your class, because other people can see the content on here as you're sharing. So once I go here, let's say I want to start with a Plex on scientific notation, try out this Plex. And then I would choose the Insert Edit Media option. And this is where I would paste my embed code that I copied earlier. So go ahead and paste that there. I can preview it, make sure it looks right. We're good, we got that Plex in there. And then if I finalize this, it will bump me straight to that lesson, and we'll be able to see that Plex in action right there. So here you can see this Plex, and it will launch this into a new window, and you'll be able to see that piece. Now, if I just had that little interactive screen, just this right side, it would actually stay directly within the lesson itself. It doesn't even need to launch in a new window. So hopefully that answered your question from that piece.
Sure. I'm going to take the screen back because I think an important thing to discuss before this webinar is over is what everybody can do after customizing a FlexBook or creating a quiz.
So you can assign any 2.0 lesson from the section of the FlexBook for CK-12, which allows you to assign kind of multiple sections at once from the table of contents or individual pieces. Alternatively, you could assign a related modality or quiz separately from a lesson. And one thing to note, if you choose to assign practice from that orange button at the top of a related piece, just note you're pulling from all the practice that covers that concept across our site versus assigning the specifically tied in practice for a 2.0 lesson. Now make sure if you're assigning anyway, however you're assigning content, that your students click turn in, because that is what triggers their actual assignment score going to your class report. So just make sure they click that at the end. Now, if you don't want a report, you don't need a report for a lesson, you just want students to have something as a resource, you're more than welcome to use the various share options on our platform. This will allow you to post in Google Classroom, send an email with a link, or share something on social media. If you share to a class, it will add that resource to the resources section of a CK-12 class specifically. And you can always share a page on CK-12 using a URL. We often recommend doing this kind of for the whole FlexBook that you're working with, so students can see it as a general resource, but then assigning individual lessons so that students get a report. Students will then want to access each and every lesson from their assignment workflow, as that's the best way for all of their credentials and the turn-in buttons to all show up as they work. Now, while we don't recommend it, since you will lose the adaptivity of a practice or interactivity of a lesson, you do have the option to download a PDF of any custom lesson or FlexBook, or you can download a worksheet with quiz or practice questions and share that with others as needed. I know that's especially important with students without access. The last thing that we highly recommend you do for a custom FlexBook or other non-quiz modality is we recommend that you publish it to share it with others. You can do this by clicking on the Publish option in the table of contents of a 2.0 FlexBook, or the same option on the left side for any individual modality. This then will start showing up in search under the Community Contributed tab there. This makes it easy for your students and colleagues to find it, and it adds to the resources for the whole community. It is also a required step if you want to add a book to a school or district page. So what is a school or district page? We do recommend that if you're creating a bunch of books for a school or district, that you publish them and add them to a school's page. This will not only help your students and colleagues easily find all the books from your school or district, but it will help others near you find and maybe even collaborate with you on content. If you don't already have a schools page, you can click on the Can't Find Your School ? Link, and then fill out the form to get one added. So with that, I'm going to let Lindsay do some wrap-up pieces, and then we'll go back and answer any final questions.
Yes, I'll let you take a look at the Q&A window and see what everybody's asking. And I just have a few announcements to make. Tomorrow we have a special webinar that's part of the EdSurge and ISTE series on understanding the impact of coronavirus on K-12 education. So we suggest that you join that. We'll put the link in the chat window here shortly. If you were intrigued by this session and want to learn more about how to work in teams or implement CK-12 in your classes, our next CEP webinar, Strategies for Using CK-12, is on April 28th at 1 o'clock Pacific time. If you missed our FlexBook 2.0 platform webinar, that one will be offered on May 6th at 10 a.m. Pacific time as the start of the May series. We'll keep adding to the schedule this spring, so check it out and share it with your colleagues who might want to join us in the future. And just a reminder, like all upcoming, or like our upcoming strategies webinar and our FlexBook 2.0 one, this hour-long webinar is one of the core sessions for the CK-12 Certified Educator Program. If you're brand new to the Certified Educator Program and want to get more information, go to ck12.org/certified and click register. We would love to get some feedback about our webinar. We're always looking to improve, and we read every word that you guys say. So if you have a couple of minutes, please go to this tinyurl.com. It's tinyurl.com/CK12feedback1920. It's just a short survey that will let us know how we're doing and how we can improve. So I'm going to go ahead and say thank you to everyone for joining us today. Know that you are supported by our team. We're happy to help you. You can send an email to jumpstart@ck12.org. We are also on all of the socials as CK12 Foundation. So we'd love it if you would like us on social media and tell others about your participation in our program. So if you need to jump off of this webinar and all of your questions have been answered, so long. We'll see you next time. For anyone else who's interested, we will stay on, and I'm going to pass it back to Katie, who's going to start working her way through the Q&A.
Great. Thanks, Lindsay. So one of the questions is, when did you say that understanding impact of coronavirus webinar is? It's tomorrow. If you log into CK-12 Fresh or kind of jump over to a different webinars page, for example, you'll see this sign up link to EdSurge. So it's tomorrow at 11 a.m. PDT. So go ahead and do that. I'm going to close this, but I will go from there. We had a couple different questions about Canvas. So I'm going to actually open up Canvas for a second so you guys can see what that looks like. As we said, those insights are available as well from within Canvas, but you'd want to do that by opening up an assignment. So you can see all of your classwork and assignments here. And I think I have insights already filled out for practice and medals. So when I load this practice, just like a student would click on that link to load that practice or that lesson and assignment, then I can go ahead and for anything that exists where students have done work, I'm going to go ahead and click on that toolbar and insights, and then I would actually be able to see the insights for my students who've already completed it. So you would just open up a 2.0 lesson from directly within Canvas. So hopefully that answered that piece. If not, let me know. And then we also had the question about how do I share a whole FlexBook? So let's say I want to share this entire FlexBook here. It's actually cleanest if I go ahead and I kind of open it from my library because that's most likely how you'd be doing it. And then it will have the latest revision attached to it. So if I open up this lesson, I can share this to a CK-12 class using share to class. I can share it externally using this green little share plane option. Or the easiest option if you need to put it somewhere else is to just copy this link. And then in here, I can make an announcement and say, here's the FlexBook. And paste that link. So that would allow me to kind of post that and save it and have it available within Canvas. So hopefully that answered my Canvas pieces. We had a question about adding adaptive practice to your own CK-12 book. So I'm going to go back to CK-12. And we're going to pick the book that I started with to begin with, that brand new book that has no content in it, has no practice already attached. So I can filter by FlexBook 2.0. And I'm going to bring my brand new demo FlexBook that has no practice here. And I am going to edit it. So if I want to add practice to a particular lesson, I have two choices. If I was creating brand new content that didn't have practice within CK-12, then I would make a quiz and I would add that quiz either through the related tab right here, where I can add a modality from my quizzes, and I could, let's say, use my scientific notation quiz here, totally fine. I could do the same thing from the front end where I swap to that quiz. But if I didn't want to tie it to that and I wanted to add it to a CK-12 concept that existed already, what I would want to do is go to the details page and add a primary concept. So for here, see how there's no concept already tagged to this lesson because it's a brand new lesson? I would click choose a concept. I could then pick scientific notation, search for that option, and let's say I want the one for physical science. So this would pull all the practice for physical science here. And when I finalize this draft, then you would start seeing that matching practice show up accordingly. So now it has this view practice option, and I can preview the matching scientific notation practice that's there. So you would add it to the primary concept on the details page, and that would pull from our existing pieces. Or if you created your own new practice, then we could go ahead back here, and you could swap out or add in. In this case, I would switch to a quiz. If there was no practice there already, I would just add that quiz directly. And it looks like we have one other question about short answer choices for a quiz. So I'm going to go ahead to my library. And I'm going to open a quiz that I was working on. Say this one. And I'm going to just create a brand new question type so that you guys can see this created from here. So for short answer questions, there's a couple things to keep in mind. One is that students only have what's on their keyboard to type in for the answer. So let's say I was creating a short answer question that said, what term demonstrates 1.34 times 10 to the third for this formatting. And I wanted the answer to be scientific notation. That is completely fine. You do max out at 3 words because after that, there's too many variations that might or might not work. If you wanted to add an alternate correct answer, that's an option. That's really helpful when you're talking about the fraction of 0 or 0.5. You would need to add those as distinct answers, kind of your original one and your additional one as you go through. But those are all options. And then I could go ahead and add my concept. So let's search in my library for scientific notation. And this would tag it to a lesson in my library versus the general topic. Either option is fine. And you can preview this now to see what a student would see. And they would see the question that you wrote to begin with. And then, now that's not super helpful, but if I check that, it wasn't spelled that way. But this is actually telling me I might want to actually fix that. So let's go ahead and fix the spelling of that piece and add that part in there. So that's how you create a short answer question in our question editor.
Awesome. I think we're getting to the end of our Q&A. I think our team is typing an answer to this one about Google Classroom. So this is kind of the last call for any questions that anybody else might have if you need to see Katie demo anything.
Sure. So it looks like the question came up where you assign 1 unit to students in here. So let's go ahead and open up a lesson. Let's see if this is a particular 2.0 lesson. And if I go ahead and I open this up, if you're within CK-12, then you will get, oh, this is a video. So let's go pick a different one. I think I labeled one of these down here, combining like terms. So if I open this lesson and it's part of a CK-12 FlexBook, students do have the ability to navigate forward and backward, but they won't be able to turn that in yet. So they can only, where I see the assign button, for any lesson that a student created or that you've created for a student, they would see a turn in button here. They wouldn't see anything if they, let's say, navigated backwards to 2.11. They would not be able to turn that in yet. You actually, the best practice is to have a student open up a lesson, access this from that particular piece, and submit it there, and then go back to Google Classroom and open it again. We actually may remove these forward and back arrows to alleviate some of that confusion, but you definitely want to have them access each time from the link within Google Classroom or Canvas or Schoology so that their credentials pass cleanly and they're able to turn in what has been assigned. And it looks like we have a question about FlexBooks with inline questions. Those are available in some of our newer books. They're not available in some of our older books. As we continue to update content, you may see them more, but you are always welcome to add your own in there. So I think with that, we are out of questions, and we thank you for joining us today, and we hope to see you again in the future.